Up that issue with the lack of partitions there to 3 different Tyson officials that day. I was eventually told they will install more. That's some good news there. Of course, there is another side to this story, too. We all saw that letter from Chairman John Tyson earlier this week saying the supply chain is breaking.
America's largest meat company just did the unthinkable, and they have been hiding it from you. Tyson Foods has secretly been shutting down plant after plant, erasing over 10,000 jobs like they never existed. Entire towns are being wiped off the map. Workers are finding out their lives are over with zero warning. What Tyson just did in Nebraska will send shockwaves through every grocery store in America. And the worst part? This is only the beginning. If you eat meat, you need to hear this right now, because what is coming next will change everything.
A lot of money. The squeeze on beef is horrendous. It's also hurting any company that sells beef.
You told us the herd was going up now, finally.
From 51, yeah, but 1951, the president needs to intervene and get us some cows from Argentina.
A wave of plant closures is sweeping across rural America, and at the center of it stands Tyson Foods, the nation's largest meat company. Since the beginning of 2023, Tyson has shut down more than a dozen processing facilities, eliminating over 10,000 jobs and leaving entire communities wondering how they will survive. This is not a story about a single factory closing its doors. This is about a systematic dismantling of America's meat processing infrastructure, and the workers and towns caught in the middle are paying the price. The numbers alone tell a stark story. Since early 2023, Tyson Foods has closed at least 6 chicken processing plants, 3 beef facilities, 1 pork plant, and several prepared foods operations. More than 10,000 workers have lost their jobs. Many of these facilities were located in small towns with populations under 10,000 people, where the Tyson plant was often the largest employer by far. When that employer disappears, there is no safety net and nowhere else to turn. The first major wave of closures hit in August 2023. Tyson announced it would simultaneously close 4 chicken processing plants in North Little Rock, Arkansas, Corydon, Indiana, Dexter, Missouri, and Noel, Missouri. These 4 closures alone eliminated more than 1,500 jobs in a single announcement. But this was only the beginning of what would become a pattern over the next 2 years. Even before that August announcement, Tyson had already closed chicken plants in Van Buren, Arkansas, and Glen Allen, Virginia earlier in 2023. After the August closures, 2 more chicken facilities in Jacksonville, Florida, and Columbia, South Carolina were shut down at the beginning of 2024. When you add them all up, 8 chicken processing plants closed in 2023 alone, resulting in more than 4,200 workers being laid off. These were not temporary layoffs or seasonal adjustments. These were permanent closures of facilities that had operated for decades. David Handy was one of those workers. He had spent 5 years at the Tyson plant in Noel, Missouri, operating a pallet jack and earning $18 an hour. The plant employed 1,500 people in a town with a population of just over 2,000. When Tyson hosted a job fair for workers facing layoffs, Handy showed up despite having symptoms of illness. He could not afford to miss the opportunity. When he arrived, there was a single employer offering positions that would have required him to commute 60 miles each way. Handy described the situation as financially crushing. His sole income came from Tyson. He had worked hard to turn his life around, and the steady job at the plant had been transformative for him. His colleagues had become his friends and family. He relied on that stability. Now, it was vanishing. The Noel plant closed on October the 20th, 2023. The facility had been acquired from the defunct Hudson Foods back in the 1990s and had operated for decades as an economic backbone of the tiny community. When 1,500 jobs disappear from a town of 2,000 people, that is not just a closure. That is the destruction of an entire local economy. But Tyson was not finished. In March 2024, the company announced it would close its pork processing plant in Perry, Iowa. The facility employed nearly 1,300 people in a town of 8,000. Put that in perspective, the next largest employers in Perry had only 100 to 150 employees. The Tyson plant was everything to that community. Perry Mayor Dirk Kavanaugh was direct about the implications when he said he did not know how the town would recover. David Edwards, a longtime employee at the Perry plant, described hearing about the announcement. He said there were a lot of people in tears, and that he was almost in tears himself just thinking about it. So many people had given their heart and soul to that plant, he explained, and to have it happen out of the blue felt crazy. The timing made the closure even more painful for Perry. The community was still recovering from a school shooting just months earlier that had killed 3 people and injured 6 others. The town was dealing with emotional trauma when the economic devastation hit. The plant closed on June 28, 2024. It had been operating for nearly 60 years under various owners since the bad 1950s or early 60s. What made the Perry closure particularly cruel was that Tyson had recently invested millions of dollars in the facility, including upgrading the meat freezers. Workers believed the plant was secure. Many had just purchased homes. Some had relocated to Perry specifically because of the promise of good wages and job security at Tyson. Those promises evaporated overnight. Ajor Kueth had worked at the Perry plant for 3 years on the ham line, cutting meat alongside 16 other workers. She and her husband had bought their home in 2023. Less than a year later, Tyson announced the closure. About half of the 1,300 workers lived in Perry, while the other half commuted from surrounding areas. All of them faced the same impossible question: what comes next? Manuel de Jesus Hernandez had worked at the Perry plant for 24 years, mostly as a trainer on the production floor. He was frustrated with how Tyson handled the announcement and initially was not sure what he would do, but he had always been interested in commercial truck driving. After the closure, he decided to pursue that opportunity, saying that sometimes you have to make choices and wait for opportunities to come. And when he saw the chance after Tyson closed, he did not think twice. The Perry closure came as Tyson's pork business was struggling financially. Agricultural economists described 2023 and 2024 as potentially the worst years for pork producers since the late 1990s, with record-high input costs crushing profitability across the industry. Then came the beef closures. In December 2024, Tyson announced it would close 3 more facilities. The Emporia, Kansas beef plant, and 2 prepared foods plants in Philadelphia would shut down. The Emporia facility alone affected 809 workers, while the 2 Philadelphia plants eliminated another 229 jobs. The Emporia plant was massive, covering 320 sheds, 8,000 square feet, and processing seasoned and marinated proteins as well as ground beef. The closure was scheduled for February 14, 2025. In a letter to Emporia officials, Tyson's vice president of operations for beef and pork stated that the decision was part of the company's business strategy to operate more efficiently. About 200 Emporia plant workers might be absorbed into Tyson's operation in Holcomb, Kansas, but the rest faced unemployment in a city of about 24,000 residents. Kansas Senator Roger Marshall, who serves on the Senate Agriculture Committee, called the news devastating for families and the community, especially coming right before Christmas. His office committed to helping individuals find jobs, but the question remained: where would those jobs come from? What other factory in Emporia could offer comparable wages and benefits? The Emporia plant had a long history. It had once been a slaughter plant, but around 2008, as the cattle supply began declining in the region, Tyson converted it to a value-added beef and pork cutting facility. The plant had survived multiple ownership changes, economic downturns, and industry consolidation over the decades. What it could not survive was Tyson's efficiency calculations in 2024. Then came the announcement that shocked the entire industry. On November 21, 2025, Tyson Foods announced it would permanently close its beef processing facility in Lexington, Nebraska. The plant employs roughly 3,200 people in a town of 11,000. It can slaughter almost 5,000 cattle per day, which represents approximately 4.8% of total daily beef slaughter capacity in the entire United States. This marked the first time one of the so-called Big Four meatpacking companies has permanently closed a major plant during the current cattle supply shortage. The Big Four, which includes Tyson, JBS, Cargill, and National Beef, control approximately 83 to 85% of all beef processing capacity in the United States. When one of these giants closes a major facility, it sends shockwaves through the entire industry. The Lexington closure is scheduled for January 20th, 2026. Workers have been told they have no guaranteed transfers to other facilities. These are essentially permanent job losses for most of the 3,200 employees. The plant was built in 1990 and later acquired by Tyson. For 35 years, it has been an economic backbone of Lexington, employing a significant portion of the local workforce. On a cold day after Mass at a Catholic church in Lexington, worshippers gathered in the basement with barely concealed fear on their faces. One worker named Alejandra Gutierrez described the feeling, saying that suddenly they tell you there is no more work and your world closes in on you. The reality is that hundreds of families may be forced to pack up and leave the town, heading east to Omaha, or Iowa, or south to meatpacking towns in Kansas or beyond. This exodus will cause secondary layoffs in restaurants, barbershops, grocery stores, convenience stores, and other small businesses throughout Lexington. Nebraska Senator Deb Fischer expressed her disappointment in strong terms. As the single largest employer in Lexington, she said, "Tyson's announcement will have a devastating impact on a wonderful community, the region, and the entire state." She called on Tyson to do everything possible to take care of the families affected by what she called a short-sighted decision. Jennifer Norton, the library director in Lexington, worries that the closure will mean a significant population decline and a loss of the town's identity. Lexington is an incredibly diverse community, and Norton said they have the world in Lexington, Nebraska. She fears there will be a large exodus of the immigrant population simply because there will not be jobs in town anymore. That world that makes Lexington unique is about to scatter across the Midwest. At the same time as announcing the Lexington closure, Tyson also said it would convert its Amarillo, Texas beef facility to a single full-capacity shift. The Amarillo plant can process about 6,000 cattle per day. This shift reduction affects approximately 1,700 workers. When you combine the Lexington closure with the Amarillo shift reduction, Tyson is eliminating about 7 to 9% of total beef processing capacity across the entire nation. The human toll of these closures extends far beyond the numbers. More than 10,000 workers have lost their jobs since 2023. These are not minimum wage positions. These are skilled jobs that often pay $18 to $20 per hour or more in areas where that income provides a solid middle-class life. The workers know meat processing inside and out. They understand specialized equipment and have decades of institutional knowledge. Where are they supposed to go now? The closures have hit hardest in rural communities where alternative employment simply does not exist. When Tyson closes a plant in a town of 2,000 or 8,000 or 11,000 people, there is no backup employer waiting to hire hundreds of workers. There is nowhere else to go. Workers face impossible choices. They can uproot their families and move to another state hoping to find work. They can try to commute hours to another plant if they are lucky enough to get hired. Or they can leave the industry entirely and start over in a completely different field. For contract growers who raise chickens for Tyson, the closures have been catastrophic. Timothy Bundren, a poultry farmer in Arkansas, suddenly lost his contract when Tyson closed several processing plants near his farm. When he heard the news, he thought to himself that if he was hearing it correctly, he was out of business. How was he going to pay back such a large loan, he wondered. Raising poultry is the most expensive type of livestock or animal production farming in the United States. Farmers invest millions of dollars in specialized barns and equipment to meet Tyson's exact specifications. The poultry industry pioneered the practice of outsourcing debt and risk to contract growers. When Tyson closes plants, those farmers are left with crushing debt and no one to buy their chickens. Tyson Foods has consistently pointed to financial necessity as the driving force behind these plant closures. The financial picture tells a complicated story that goes beyond simple profit and loss. In 2023, Tyson Foods reported a loss of $417 million in its third quarter, which fell well below what Wall Street analysts had expected. The company also showed a loss of $1.18 per share. When adjusted for various factors, earnings per share came in at just 15 cents, compared to the 34 cents that analysts had predicted. CEO Donnie King spoke frankly during an investor meeting on the same morning that Tyson announced 4 plant closures in August 2023. He explained that the assets they were shuttering would have required significant capital investment to make them competitive. When you look at the potential returns on those investments, he said, it really did not make sense to pursue them. King described the facilities being closed as typically smaller in scale and in need of major capital to make them viable. He credited automation and other factors for allowing the company to close facilities while still maintaining adequate supply levels. The chicken business had faced particular challenges leading up to the closures. King acknowledged that the company had experienced numerous fits and starts from the breeder side to consumer demand. A few years earlier, Tyson had an unexpected decline in egg hatchings because of issues with the types of roosters they were using. Then during the holiday season, demand came in significantly below what the company had anticipated. November and December retail sales for fresh chicken were softer than expected or planned for. This created an oversupply situation that drove prices down across the market. However, it is the beef business that has truly devastated Tyson's financial performance. The beef division is the company's largest unit, and it has been losing enormous amounts of money. In fiscal year 2023, which ended in September, the beef unit generated income of $233 million. Just 1 year later, by fiscal year 2024, that same unit reported an adjusted loss of $291 million. The situation continued to deteriorate. For fiscal year 2025, which ended in September of that year, the beef segment posted an adjusted operating loss of $426 million. The unadjusted loss was even more staggering at $1.135 billion. Looking ahead to fiscal year 2026, Tyson projects that beef segment losses will total somewhere between $400 million and $600 million. The beef segment is operating with a negative margin, and company officials have given no indication of when that might turn positive. While sales rose to $21.62 billion for fiscal 2025, the company actually sold 8.4% fewer pounds of beef, even as prices climbed 17%. The math simply does not work when you are selling less product at higher prices, but still losing money. The root cause of these beef losses lies in the dramatic shrinking of the American cattle herd. Tyson reported that its cattle costs for fiscal year 2025 rose by nearly $2 billion compared to the prior year. The United States cattle herd has dwindled to its smallest size since the 1950s, representing a 70-year low. As of January 1, 2025, the national cattle herd stood at 86.7 million head, the smallest number since 1951. Several consecutive years of drought across major cattle-producing regions, combined with herd liquidation and record-high feed costs, have driven this dramatic reduction in cattle numbers. Record prices for fed cattle and feeder cattle during 2025 resulted directly from this historically tight supply situation. The supply was further constricted when the southern border was closed to Mexican feeder cattle to prevent a parasite called New World screwworm from entering the United States. On top of that, a 50% increase in tariffs on Brazilian beef in mid-August nearly eliminated imports of lean trimmings and ground beef components that are typically blended into ground beef products. With fewer cattle available for processing, packers like Tyson must pay significantly more for the animals they do process. This squeezes profit margins dramatically. When you are slaughtering 8.4% fewer cattle but paying $2 billion more for them, the financial math becomes impossible. The contrast between worker layoffs and executive compensation has not gone unnoticed. CEO Donnie King saw his compensation increase 73% to $22.4 million in 2024. His pay jumped another 51% in 2025 to $34.5 million. Ryan Douglas, a hospital CEO in Lexington, Nebraska, wrote an open letter to King about the plant closure. Douglas had moved to Lexington in March 2025 to serve as a healthcare administrator. Within months, he was preparing for the largest employer in town to shut down. In his letter, Douglas pointed out that the decisions made in a boardroom in Arkansas have consequences that cascade through every aspect of life in communities like Lexington. When you talk about closing a plant out of necessity, Douglas wrote, what you are really saying is that you chose shareholder returns and executive compensation over the community that helped make those profits possible for 35 years. Despite the struggling beef division, Tyson Foods remains one of the biggest and most profitable meat companies in the world. In fiscal 2025, the company brought in $54.4 billion in sales and generated more than $2.2 billion in operating income. Most of that profit came from the chicken and prepared foods businesses, which have both turned around dramatically. A University of Nebraska study attempted to quantify the economic impact of just the Lexington plant closure. The total job losses as a result of the plant closing are expected to reach around 7,000 when you include the ripple effects throughout the broader economy. Tyson employees at the plant alone will lose an estimated $241 million in pay and benefits annually. The estimated annual statewide economic impact totals $3.283 billion when you account for both direct effects and multiplier effects on Nebraska's economy. Total labor income losses are projected at $530.41 million per year across all those jobs. State personal income tax revenue will decline by an estimated $23.209 million annually, while Nebraska state sales tax revenues are projected to fall by $10.16 million per year. These numbers represent far more than abstract statistics. They translate into grocery stores with fewer customers, restaurants with empty tables, banks foreclosing on homes, and schools watching enrollment decline. When the largest employer in a town closes, the entire community can enter what economists call a death spiral, where declining tax revenues force service cuts, which makes the town less attractive, which causes more people to leave. The broader industry context reveals systemic problems beyond just Tyson. Meatpacking plants across America closed at unprecedented rates in 2024. Rising livestock costs, workforce shortages, food safety violations, foodborne illness outbreaks, and ongoing industry consolidation all contributed to the closures. A review of government layoff notification data and industry reports found at least 15 plant shutdowns in each of 2024 and 2023, representing the highest number of closures in a decade. Tyson Foods led this troubling trend with some of the largest layoffs in the industry. The cattle shortage affecting Tyson is real and impacting the entire beef industry. The United States Department of Agriculture projects that domestic beef production will decrease approximately 2% in fiscal 2026. Economists note that cattle supplies remain at that 70-year low, and rebuilding the herd has been slower than many expected. Factors include the older average age of cattle producers, higher interest costs making expansion difficult, and the preference of many cattle producers to pay down existing debt rather than retain heifers for breeding purposes. What makes Tyson's response notable is that this marks the first time one of the big four meatpacking companies has permanently closed a major plant during a cattle supply crunch. Other processors are maintaining capacity or even expanding in some areas, while Tyson sheds facilities and consolidates operations. This raises questions about whether market dynamics fully explain the closures or whether other strategic considerations are at play. The decisions to close these plants and the way closures have been handled will have lasting consequences for rural America. More than 10,000 jobs have disappeared since 2023, with thousands more layoffs coming in the months ahead. The Lexington plant closes in January 2026. Workers face their final paychecks, families prepare to scatter across the Midwest, and communities brace for an uncertain future. What is happening at Tyson reflects broader changes in how America processes its food, who benefits from that system, and who pays the price when efficiency becomes the only metric that matters.